Hi, everyone. It's Charlotte Loppie, and welcome to the first edition of the HSD Research Circle. This is our very first edition, April 2021. We're going to try this out as an animated newsletter for you about research and researchers in HSD. And so today we're going to be talking to Dr. Nathan Lachowsky. He is an associate professor in the School of Public Health and Social Policy, and he has been engaged in HIV and sexual health research for a number of years, is very well known across the campus, Canada, and globally for his work. And so we're going to have a conversation with him. We're also going to talk with one of his many graduate students, Alex Wells, who's also going to talk about the research that he's engaged in. And we're going to have a circle talk with the HSD's research support staff about upcoming opportunities, tips and tricks for research, as well as what's actually going on in terms of research in our faculty. So hopefully you'll enjoy this, and it will be the first of many. If you have suggestions that you'd like to send us for topics you'd like covered, questions you want answered, people you'd like to hear from, please do let us know, and we will do our best to accommodate you. So hi, Nate.
Hello.
Thanks so much for agreeing to do this with us. And so folks, Nate has agreed to come and talk to us a little bit about his work, and we have sent him some questions to answer. And so I'm just going to start with the first one, and I'm going to have to look at it because now I've forgotten what it was. So how would you describe your research to your next door neighbor?
Yeah, I love this question because it makes me think about which neighbor are we talking about. And I think that's partly, do you know what I mean, that we often have to talk about our work differently to different people. Thankfully now, to some extent, I can say that I work in public health and I'm an epidemiologist, and people know what that is now. So that's been a silver lining of the last year or so. But generally, I normally tell people that I work with marginalized communities on issues like HIV and sexual health, and now COVID-19. And I normally do a bit of did you know kind of talk when I talk to kind of folks out in the community. So I might say something like, June, for example, if you're a guy who has sex with other guys, doesn't matter what kind of sex you have, whether you use condoms or not, whether you're in a monogamous or a closed relationship, you can't donate blood in Canada. And I normally like posing that question to folks because it normally gets them, either they're like, yeah, I totally know that, and then the conversation goes from there, or they're like, I had no idea, that sounds, insert whatever their reaction is to that, and then that gives me a bit of a sense of where to go from there. So
that's very cool. Your neighbors must find you fascinating.
We do have lots of interesting conversations. I've definitely had a neighbor come by and be like, this is the house where people do sex research, right? And yes, it is. All REB approved.
Among other things, yes. So yeah, well, thanks for that. And so just curious, who or what has inspired you as a researcher, and then, in what ways?
Yeah, I mean, I've met some incredible people when I think about the different places I've lived through my kind of educational journey and through my career. And I think it's those people that have really shared impactful stories of things that I've never experienced or didn't know about, or who lived in decades prior to me. When I think about the onset of the HIV epidemic, for example. And those stories are really, I think, what inspires me to think about how do I take the tools that I learned as a student and as a researcher and wield them for service to the community. And that really, to me, feels like I can play my part in building a better world. We know that research has caused harm for many communities, but it also can cause benefits and healing. And so really trying to think more about how to work differently so that we can do more of the latter. And I think, I mean, for me, I think one of the inspiring things to see is the tangible research, like impacts that research can have. I'm really motivated by applied research. So seeing new programs or services build or change as a result of our research, sometimes even seeing organizations move from kind of grassroots movements into more, do you know what I mean, fully fledged community service organizations is amazing. And on rare occasion, we sometimes been able to shift policy or change policy a little bit. And so when I think about during increased access to preventive HIV medications or new kinds of HIV testing, or even during the recent shortening of blood deferral criteria. So those kinds of tangible applied aspects are really, I think, what it's good to remind myself of when the going gets tough and it's hard to find that motivation. So I think just making sure you take time to celebrate those things when they do happen.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's just so great to work in a faculty where community engaged and really applied research is so valued, right? It's not the case in HSD is like, I think it's such a great place for that and lots of other reasons. So
Yeah, I think that's the part that's kind of when you think about how do you introduce your research to a neighbor. At HSD, it feels like there's already a common understanding of some of these principles and approaches, and that's just kind of the way we work. And that during it's different for it's not the same for everybody, but it's nice to have that kind of common shared culture.
yeah, absolutely. And so I know you work with tons of students who love you. Um, but what's a piece of advice that you generally give to students? I mean, I know we try to tailor our mentorship to students,
Mm.
to help them on their own journey. But what's a piece of advice that you tend to give to motivate students?
Yeah, I wonder sometimes whether it should be do as I say and not, not as I do. Um,
Yeah.
I have some incredible students and trainees that I get to work with. And I mean, they really shape the work that we do.
Mm,
And I feel like a lot of my work now is really just trying to find ways to lift those folks up. Um, I mean, I think for me, some advice that I really appreciated when I was a grad student was one of my advisors always said, you can try everything once. You know what I mean? Don't just shirk away from an opportunity or an offer that someone makes. Do you know what I mean? And go and take a webinar, go and sit in something that you might not think might be relevant, and that I think has always been fun and leads to totally unexpected things. And I think sometimes people are often like, "What's your 1 year plan? What's the 5 year plan?" But
yeah.
I think sometimes you just be in the moment and take up what you've got around you. It's kind of one piece. I mean, I think for me, a big thing is to remember the relationships. These are really the best motivators, and they're the things that persist beyond projects and grants and papers and reports and all of that stuff. So I think a lot about the relationships that I've been able to make and try to sustain over the years, despite being in different places. And that's something that I think, yeah, when the going gets tough in academia and you need to finish something by a deadline and you can't really see the relevance of that particular task to the working community, I think just remembering that it is always connected to those things is helpful. And then I think the other pieces, I think we also have a lot of culture in HSD of a lot of kind of critical researchers and really looking at systems and the ways in which they can oppress and suppress people and communities. And so I think one of the things I try to kind of encourage my students to reflect on is how much resource and opportunities universities carry and hold, and the ways in which we can, as graduate students or postdocs or faculty, access that in a way in which to try and serve and support communities. And I think really trying to think creatively about how to work from the inside when you are within the system is important. And I think there's lots of opportunity out there outside of the university once you graduate for different kinds of jobs and work. But I think when you're here, it's kind of thinking about how do you maximize what resources we do have around to try and help folks.
Yeah, those are such important teachings for students to receive early on in their career. That it's not just always about fighting against a system. That sometimes the best way to make change is actually from the inside. Not for everyone, but
Mhm.
yeah. Well, that's great. Great to know a bit about more about what motivates you and how you motivate other people. But on a more personal note, we have a mystery question for each one of our guests that we
Love
might
it. Good,
ask. A
good.
different mystery question. And this actually is plausible. Imagine that you are given your own late night talk show. it's plausible, right? You're a very charismatic guy. And so who would be your first guest and why?
Oh, I mean, when you said late night talk show, I immediately went to Sex, Toys, and Chocolate. During one of my former supervisors and mentors, Robin Milhausen, was on that. And so, yeah, I mean, I think the media is such an interesting opportunity to talk to the public. And so when you said late night, I immediately was like, well, we're going to talk about sex because that just feels so fitting. And then when you said who's the first person, I immediately just thought my mom, because I think that that's like just such a great way in which to like bridge generations, talk about, do you know what I mean, why I was raised the way I was, do you know what I mean? And I think that my mom would find that totally uncomfortable and also maybe hilarious after the fact. So yeah.
That's a great answer. Making moms feel uncomfortable is one of the biggest benefits of being a kid. You can't make that's great.
So
So
I'm her kid forever. So
that's a really good answer. Thank you so much, Nate. Really appreciate your time today. And yeah, I don't know how to end these things with Chester sticking his face in my face. But yeah, we're all really grateful to have you. So thanks.
Yeah, no, pleasure. I look forward to seeing folks on a Zoom or hopefully at some point in a hallway.
Hi, folks. So now we're going to be speaking with another guest, a student who is working on his PhD in the Social Dimensions of Health program. His name is Alex Wells. I know him well. And he works very closely with Nate Lachowsky, who we spoke to earlier. And so welcome, Alex. Really nice to see you.
Lovely to see you as well. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you today.
Yeah, our little coffee talk. And so, yeah, we have some questions for you, and I'm going to just jump right in. And so, first of all, would you like to introduce yourself to folks?
Yeah, sure. My name is Alex Wells. I'm a PhD student in the Social Dimensions of Health at the University of Victoria. My pronouns are he, him, and they, them. Originally, I'm from Toronto, and territory that is governed by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum, or recognized by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum. And before starting my PhD, I was a social worker. I did my master's degree in social work. And I have now migrated west to Vancouver Island. And yeah, I live, work, and research with queer and trans communities across Canada.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so first, just wondered if you'd like to tell us a little bit about your work. I know that you're currently working with Nate Lachowsky as a research assistant, and so maybe you could just tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. So with Nate, or Dr. Lachowsky, I work on several projects. Right now, I'm working with him on the PrEP implementation project, or the PRIMP project, where we're speaking with gay, bi, queer, and other dudes who are having sex with dudes in Vancouver and in Victoria about their experiences on PrEP, which is pre-exposure prophylaxis, which is a tool that or a medication that folks can take in order to help stop the transmission of HIV. And we're working on that project in collaboration with folks also in Ontario. So we're interviewing folks in both provinces to kind of get a sense for what PrEP access and PrEP experiences look like in both of those jurisdictions. We're just wrapping up a project called the Serious Legal Problems LGBTQ 2+ people in Western Canada, where we've been speaking with queer, trans, two-spirit folks in British Columbia, Alberta, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan about their experiences with the legal system in Canada. And I also am working on the Party and Play project, where we spoke with guys who are gay, bi, queer, and other men who have sex with men who are engaged in sexualized meth use. And lastly, I'm also working with Nate on my doctoral work. We just got a grant from the Vancouver Foundation to hold a consultation with LGBTQ2S recreational sports leagues in Vancouver to kind of start to get a sense for the ways that LGBTQ2S recreational sports impact the health and well-being of queer and trans people. And we're going to hopefully use that as the jumping point to a national project that will be the basis for my doctoral work.
That's awesome. Wow. You have nothing to do.
I am bored. No, this is just
Clearly,
like,
you're bored.
I get like very excited about projects and then I'm like right in it and I'm just like, why do I keep doing this to myself?
Well, you're in the right place because we're
Apparently.
all like that. Yeah, we're all like that.
Well, that's just it. Like working with Nate, where I'm just like,
yeah.
Nate, you do so much all the time.
Yeah. He's a busy guy, that's for sure. And so, what's the most exciting part of your work for you? Like, what do you find most interesting?
The things I really like, I say I do mixed methods, but I'm really a qual person, I think, at heart. And like even more specifically, I'm a like semi-structured interview person because I really love like doing what we're doing now with research participants, just because like every time I sit down and do an interview with someone, something really interesting comes out, like, and it might have nothing to do with a research project, and I don't care. Like, I just like when people are like, oh yeah, I used to be a bartender in this small town, like, and like we would have drag nights on Wednesdays. Those things are always really funny and interesting and like heartwarming, or like there's just always something that comes out where I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And like 9 times out of 10, it's not going to end up in a manuscript or anything, but like I always find that like at the end of a project, I've gotten to speak with 15, 20, 50 people who've had really interesting experiences. And I am always really grateful that I get to hear them or that they share them with me.
Yeah.
So that's, I guess, like the most interesting thing.
Yeah.
I think also because like the intersection of like research that I'm at is like community, because I'm a social worker and I'm interested in like community and the way that communities impact people's health, but also sexual health, queerness, and health more broadly. And I find that those are really interesting intersections that people don't get to talk about very often. And so when they do, they're just like, oh yeah, like I got to like meet my partner when I went to this like drag bar and like blah, blah, blah. And that's this drag bar was really important to me. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's really important. Like I get that. That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's about life. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And for those of us who are curious people, yeah, those experiences can be really, really fascinating. What about some of the challenges? Like, what do you find most challenging about this kind of work?
I think, so I think there's 2 things. Like, it's been really interesting being a researcher in the past year in the pandemic, because it's like, it's really hard for me to kind of like separate out the ways that like research has been difficult versus, or like being a researcher is hard versus like being a researcher in a global pandemic is hard. Just because there's been so many things where like I never really thought about them before. Like even just when I got on this call a bit early and I was talking with Kathy, she was like talking about my background and I was like, yeah, it's because my room is a mess and I don't want people to see that. And it's just like, right, like I'm now asking people to not just like speak and share things that might be really hard, but I'm literally asking them to invite me into their space, like invite me into their bedrooms. And so that feels really like high stakes sometimes, and it feels really invasive sometimes. Also, like me and my partner are kind of like juggling when we're like sitting in our like bedroom / office and like who like needs it for phone calls. So it's just like there's a lot of like pandemic things that are making it really that like 14 months ago I wasn't even thinking about like what that means as a researcher, or like how to navigate, or like what that's going to look like, particularly again like as grad students and people with like limited resources and opportunities, and all these other things have proven to be very hard.
Yeah, no. Yeah,
And
I just pick one clean corner of my house and make sure nobody sees anything else.
that was just it. Like, there's like, you can tell when there's laundry day in my apartment if the like background isn't on, because like there's like clean pile and then there's like the dirty pile, and they just like migrate across the room.
Yeah, I just pretend that I just live in this one little corner of my house. So I know you're going to be graduating sometime in the future. Won't push you on when. But if someone could grant you a wish after you graduate, anything, what would it be?
It's like, it's interesting because we hear this all the time, but I would really love to see like this investment in like universities and in like health and community health and like social dimensions kind of research more broadly. Because it's like, don't get me wrong, I love my project. I really care about my project. And when I meet with folks who have been engaged in like LGBTQ2S recreational sports teams and leagues, they're like, oh yeah, like I met my partner here. Or, oh yeah, like I joined a water polo team after I got dumped and it was really important to me. So like they get it. But like, when I think of all of the people in my cohort and when I think of like all the people in the program, there's so many people who are doing such rad, cool, important research. And I'm always like, oh, I want to see that. Like, I want to hear what happens. Like, I'm so interested because like you were our professor, so like you know who I'm talking about. But like there's one, Masako is just doing so much interesting thinking around like death and loneliness and like what it means to be isolated, and Ashley, who's thinking about like homeless and underhoused communities and like what it means to like actually have family and how those like homeless and underhoused families need to be taken into account in health and health research. And it's just like, I want to like, I think it would be so amazing to see opportunities for, or more opportunities for these researchers, for these conversations. Because it's just like, sometimes it just feels like, maybe this has been your experience as an academic too, but like we're just kind of screaming into the void, trying to be like, no, you need to, people should care about these things. So I would love to see like more investment in these like forms of knowledge and knowledge creation, and particularly knowledge around like communities and community health and social dimensions and determinants of health. Does that make sense? I feel like I just like word vomited.
We're all singing from the same songbook on that one for sure. Just before we leave, I have a little extra question for you that we didn't.
Okay. Oh God.
It's an easy one. Well, hopefully it's an easy one. I don't know.
Low bar, but let's see if I clear it.
Our listeners would love to know, what's your favorite sandwich?
Oh no. So like, I don't eat meat. So like, this is one of those like, and also like, I feel like, so is a burrito a sandwich?
Yes.
Like, question to the floor. Okay.
Yes.
I feel like a burrito is a sandwich because it's like, it's wrapped in like a starch and it has filling. Yeah. And like, I feel like a wrap qualifies as a sandwich. So I'm going to say like, it's a burrito. Like, I love a burrito. And one of the hardest things about moving to Victoria was finding good burritos. So if people know, I would love recommendations.
Okay, so good burritos. Any specific kind that you like?
I like bean and cheese and I like spicy. Like, finding spicy has also been difficult in Victoria.
Yes. Yeah, they're not a very spicy crowd around here. I would say they're pretty. We want to say bland. It's a British colony, so we're talking bland food here. So.
Yes. My favorite would be like when I asked for hot sauce and she said, it's pretty hot. And I was like, I know, that's why I asked for it.
Yeah, I have a daughter that's like that. Yeah. You'd have to be sprinkling pretty much like some kind of battery acid on her food for her to taste.
I respect that.
Well, listen, Alex, it was awesome to see you again. Thanks so much. I'm really excited about listening, and I have no bloopers in this, which is great. I didn't curse one time. I didn't make any inappropriate statements. So I'm totally getting good at this. So hi, folks. Thank you so much for joining our HSD Research Circle today. And we're going to begin with some introductions. And so if Emma, if you could start by introducing yourself to the our viewers.
Of course. So I'm Emma Stuart. Hopefully I know many of you who are tuning in today, but if I don't know you, I'm the administrative officer for the HSD Research Support Center. And so I kind of run and manage the center and help with all of the different sorts of things that we do. And then I also provide post-grant support to folks in HSD who hold grants. So I help them spend their money.
And Jasmine?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jasmine Desjardins. I'm the HSD Research Coordinator. And so I work alongside Emma, and I provide pre-grant services to our faculty members. So anything from identifying appropriate funding opportunities to figuring out the logistics of getting application components ready, through to navigating the internal approval process, right through to submission.
Thank you. And Kathy? You're muted.
My name's Kathy Jang. I'm Charlotte's admin assistant, and I'm just here to help everybody out.
Well, thank you so much, folks. And yeah, it's great for people to see your faces, particularly for people who joined while we were in lockdown. And so I just have four questions for you today. And so, you know, I know that you folks in the Research Support Center work really hard to get those grant applications in, and I know that there's an increasing number each year. And so how many grant applications have we submitted so far this year in 2021?
Yeah, I've got those numbers right here. We have definitely been busy. Researchers from all schools have been applying for funds from lots of different sources. So SSHRC and CIHR are always popular, but we've also seen applications submitted to foundations like the Vancouver Foundation, the Michael Smith Foundation for Health Research, and also to different levels of government. So the BC Ministry of Health, Canada's Department of National Defence, Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada. So yeah, lots of activity. So we're actually on track to have 54 applications processed through our office by the end of the month. And so this is actually a handful fewer than we received in the first quarter of last year, but it is many more than we received in the year prior. So we've consistently had, as you mentioned, year-over-year increases in total applications. So it will be interesting to see if 2021 will see us breaking last year's record, which was 141 applications for the year.
That's amazing. Wow. So yeah, and I know that you work really closely with people to make sure that their applications get through the process, you know, the internal process really quickly. But what might be one example of something that, you know, people forget to do and then it ends up holding up their application?
Yeah, so one thing that can delay the internal approval process is not having the appropriate confirmation of in-kind and cash contributions for one's application. So when an in-kind or cash contribution is mentioned in a proposal, this is something that may need to be reported on when the grant is held. So with this in mind, the Office of Research Services will want to hear directly from the source of that contribution that it has indeed been confirmed for the project as stated in the application. And so sometimes the funder will also want to see this confirmation at the application stage. And so in those cases, this is very front of mind. The researcher knows this is a requirement. They'll have gone and secured letters from all their partners. And the letters are signed, of course, by someone at the organization with the authority to sign off on the contribution. But sometimes the funding agency doesn't ask for this confirmation at the time of application, but the Office of Research Services still does require it. So this is an institutional requirement. And in this case, applicants should still be prepared to include confirmation of those contributions with their application. So since it's for internal use, a letter isn't necessary. And instead, ORS can accept, say, a copy of an email from someone at the organization with the authority to sign off on that contribution. And something else to remember is that this is true for department contributions as well. So if a researcher will be seeking, for example, office space for research staff or a course release, these are things that they will need to negotiate with their directors ahead of time. And then those contributions will be confirmed via signature by the director on the research application summary form. And so really having these confirmations in hand by the internal deadline makes, of course, for smooth internal processing, but also having all these confirmations saved all together in one place is great for the researcher because it forms a clear record of what was agreed to between them and all parties providing the contributions. And so, yeah, of course, I'd like to encourage anyone who has any questions about this institutional requirement to definitely reach out to me, and I'll be glad to discuss their specific case with them.
Wow. We're lucky to have such a friendly face behind so many rigid instructions.
We try our best.
You do, you do. You sound scary, but you don't look scary. That's always helpful.
That's our motto.
Yeah, we wait to sound scary, but we don't want to look scary.
Yeah.
That's great. Thanks, Jasmine. I didn't understand most of what you said, but I'm sure people will.
I hope.
If not, they can call Jasmine.
Yes.
Exactly. She only sounds scary. Yeah, so I know that you folks are working, beyond just helping people get their grants together and then managing them like after they've gotten the grants. There's a bunch of other things that I know you're doing, and maybe you'd like to share a couple of examples of some cool things that that the research center is doing to support HSD research.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. These are some of the exciting things that I get to do. Not that helping folks with their travel claims isn't exciting, but this is a little bit more exciting. Sorry, Charlotte. So one of the things that we're doing this spring is we've brought together folks from the Office of Ethics and also the Occupational Health and Safety Office on campus to do a little presentation for folks in HSD virtually, of course, on what's required to resume off-campus in-person research. So I know a lot of our folks their research has been continuing all throughout COVID, but most of it's been virtual. And now that we're at that year mark, folks are kind of getting itchy and they want to go and see their community partners and the different folks that they work with in community again. And we want to make sure that that's something that they can do safely and efficiently. And so we thought one of the best ways to do that was bring the people from the different departments together to answer questions about what those processes look like and make it a little bit less daunting and a little bit clearer. So on Thursday, April 8th at noon, we're going to be hosting a Zoom session with those folks. And hopefully lots of you can make it, because we really do think that it'll make some of those guidelines, which are available on the internet, a little bit clearer. Right now, there's lots of links and lots of PDFs, and there's tons of info out there, but I know I always find that just chatting with someone often makes it a little bit easier. So that's one of the things that we've put together. And then another thing we're doing this spring is launching the second round of the HSD Internal Research Grant. So last year, when Charlotte, our mighty Associate Dean Research, started, we did the first round of that competition, the first ever, and it was really successful. I think we funded about 12 applications. And so we've gotten the go-ahead to do the second round. So application guidelines for that have been sent out, and that's something we'd really encourage you folks to tap into. This year, the theme, I think, is collaboration. So also just trying to bring folks from different departments together and get to know each other a little bit and see how they can help each other further their research goals. So the deadline for that is, I have to look at my notes, May 3rd.
Awesome. Wow. Things are really heating up in the center. And so thank you so much for your this very content-based information, but people would like to get to know both of you a little bit better on a personal level. So I have a couple of questions for you, one for each of you that I hope you can answer with some degree of honesty. And so I'm going to start with you, Jasmine. And our listeners are very curious to know what is one of your hidden talents that might be considered quite useless?
Hidden talents that might be quite useless.
Something that you're really good at that no one can actually benefit from.
I'm really good at creating a soundtrack for my life in my head. So, as I'm working, you're typing this up, but it's not helpful. It's not helpful, but I'm good at it.
Well, that's a great talent. Your life to music. I love that. Thank you. And so, Emma, we would also like to know, how would your dog describe you?
Oh, this is a good question. I'm very good at describing my dog. One of my favorite things to do is talk in the voice that I imagine he has, and tell myself how his day was. But how would he describe me? I think that he would probably be quite irritated by the fact that I don't sit still a lot. Unless I'm reading, then I sit still for far too long, and he finds that annoying as well. But yeah, I kind of have like a little bit of a restless body. And so I'll get up and like sweep something or vacuum. And I think he would find that very irritating and describe it as chaotic and hectic.
Well, this has all been very, very informative, and I'm sure it will be used against you at some time in the future. But again, thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to talking to you all next month.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.